All right, gang, let's start on Chapter 3. We are on Section 3.1. We are going to identify pairs of lines and angles. This is a whole new section. We're going to take a lot of the vocabulary that we learned in the last chapter and put some more meaning to it. Our goal for this first lesson is to understand parallel, perpendicular, and skew, and to define 6 angle pairs between lines. This unit does have a lot of vocabulary. This would be a really good unit for you to make some flashcards to go with some of the terms to make sure that you have everything understood. So I am going to move ahead just a second here, and I will catch you in a second. All right, the new vocabulary for this unit, we're going to start out with parallel planes. Those are 2 planes that never intersect. Examples of that, probably the most common example would be a floor and a ceiling. You could think of it as the front of the room and the back of the room. Remember, a plane is that big, long, flat surface, and so these are 2 of those that would never intersect. Then we're going to move on to parallel lines. Those are 2 lines that never intersect. Now, there are a couple things that are important about this guy here, and that is that they must be in the same plane. And you need to make sure that you use arrows to show that lines are parallel. And what I mean by arrows is, if we look over here at this diagram on the right, do you see the 2 little red arrows? They put those arrows on there to show you that line M is parallel to line N. So over here I'm going to put M parallel to N. This little guy right here means parallel. And these arrows over on the right, those are the arrows that tell you that those 2 lines are parallel. If they had a different amount of arrows than per each of them, then they would not be parallel. If one of the lines had 2 arrows on it and the other line had only 1 arrow, then those would not be parallel. But because those lines each have just the 1 arrow, those 2 lines are parallel. Then the last term that we have here is, well, second to last, I guess, is skew. Those are 2 lines that never intersect. And notice that part of the definition is exactly the same as what we just got done talking about. 2 lines that never intersect. 2 lines that never intersect. The difference is that these 2 lines have to be in different planes. So let me highlight that. Skew has to be in different planes, and parallel has to be in the same plane. Otherwise, they're 2 lines that never intersect. Now, where do you find those in our picture? Well, this is a little bit tricky, and this is where drawing 2-dimensionally, a 3-dimensional object on 2-dimensional paper gets tricky. But do you see M that is in the back of the picture, back of the plane? And do you see this line right here that is technically in the front of the picture, because you see how it goes through N right here, and N is closer to the front? Those 2 lines do not intersect, and those are what we would call skew lines. So that would be line K and line N, there is no symbol for skew. We just have to write that. The last term that we're going to talk about is perpendicular. And perpendicular are two lines that that intersect at 90 degrees. And when we think about that 90 degree, remember that's when they put that little box in the corner. That's our symbol for 90 degree. So that is also the symbol that we use when we're talking about our perpendicular lines. If you notice in our picture, we have this little box right here. That means this line is perpendicular to this line. Right there, those are our perpendicular lines. That would be line K perpendicular to line N. And so notice that I put this symbol right here. That means perpendicular. All right, so far we have parallel, planes, parallel lines, skew lines, and perpendicular lines. I'm going to pause right there, and let's jump to page 2. We have lots more vocabulary there. All right, now we're going to be talking about a combination of lines, and the first term that we're going to talk about is the transversal. And that is what I call a cut line. It is one line that intersects two others. And if we're looking at this diagram, this guy right here is the transversal line. So right here is the transversal line. Notice that it intersects the other two lines. From there, we're going to define all of these angles that we have here. So if you look at the terms that we have, notice that we have interior angles and we have exterior angles. The first thing that I want you to do is to highlight what I would consider the interior of the picture. So with your pencil, shade that lightly. That means outside of the lines, that would be considered the exterior part. So this guy right here and this guy right here, those are the exterior. I wouldn't shade those on your paper because I think that's going to be too much, but those two green parts, those are the ones we're talking about as exterior. So what I want to do is get those extra guys out of there. And let's talk about some of these angles that we have here. The alternate interior angles, those are between the lines on the interior part, and they have to be on opposite sides of the transversal, T-R-A-N-S, transversal. So what we're talking about are angles that are in the interior, the yellow part, but they have to be on the left and the right of the transversal. So this would be one of the angles, and this would be the other angle. Notice that they both are in the yellow. One dot is on the left, one dot is in the right. If I were to think of this red dot and put it up here, those are a linear pair. That's different. Notice that we're bringing it down there. Those are my alternate interior angles. The other alternate interior angles would be on the upper right and the lower left. So let's number our angles here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Get yours all numbered the same way, and then we will label these. My alternate interior angles are angle 3 and angle 6, or angle 4 and angle 5. One thing that I want you to notice about those interior angles is that they kind of make a Z, or if I look at the other ones, the 4 and the 5, do you see how they make like a Z shape there? That's going to be something that's going to help you remember these angles. Over here, we're just going to put a letter Z. All right, let me get rid of some of this markings here. Let me put my little Z back there. Let's talk about consecutive interior angles. The consecutive interior angles are between the lines, but they need to be on the same side of the transversal. So if I look there, angle 3 is right here on the left. What would be on the same side of the transversal? The red squiggly line is angle 3, and that would be angle 5. Then if I took my little circle and put it over on the 4, what would be consecutive interior to angle 4? Well, that would be angle 6 on the bottom. Those are both on the right-hand side, and they are on the interior. Those are my consecutive interior angles. Now, if I look at those two angles, do you see that little shape right there? Or do you see the sky on this side? And to help you remember what that is, I like to think of that as a C, or if you turn the picture, if you turn your paper 90 degrees, sometimes it looks like a U. So that looks like a C or a U, backwards or forwards. And so that's another pair of our special angles. Let me get that little bit of extra work out of there. And let's talk about alternate exterior angles. Well, think about this. Alternate and exterior. They need to be outside the lines, and they need to be on the alternate side, so they need to be on opposite sides of the transversal. So if I put this up at angle 2, what would be the alternate exterior angle to angle 2 right here? And that is what I would call angle 7 down on the bottom. Angle 2 and angle 7, notice that they're both outside the lines, and they are one on the left and one on the right. Angle 2, angle 7. What would be my other two alternate exterior angles? So if I call this angle 1 as one of them, how would I name the second angle that is alternate exterior to that? And that would be this guy down here, angle 8. Angle 1 and angle 8. Those are my alternate exterior angles. All right, let me get this cleaned up here a little bit. If we were to talk about our consecutive exterior angles, thinking about what all these words mean, now we've already used the word consecutive and we've used exterior. Exterior would tell you that they have to be outside the lines, not in the yellow space right there. And then they need to be consecutive, which would be on the same side of the transversal. So if I think about that from angle 1 right there, what would be my consecutive exterior angle from angle 1? And I think that would be angle 7. Angle 1 and angle 7, both in the outside part and both on the left. Angle 1 and angle 7. If I moved to angle 2, what would be consecutive exterior to that one? And I think it would be safe to say that that would be angle 8. So angle 2 and angle 8 would be my consecutive exterior angles. Neither one of the exterior angles have any special letter that helps you remember those. We just have to kind of think about the names. The last angles that we're going to talk about are the corresponding angles, and the corresponding angles have the most kinds of angles. And this is one that can give people trouble, so you'd want to pay attention. But they are in the same corner of each intersection. I remember corner, C-O-R, and corresponding, C-O-R. Those both start with the same words, or same letters. How do you find the corresponding angles? Well, if I'm talking about, let's start with angle 1 right here. Angle 1, what angle would be in the upper left-hand corner of the bottom intersection? And that right there would be angle 5. Those two angles would be what we would consider corresponding angles. Angle 1 and angle 5. Then which angle would correspond to angle 4? And if I look there, notice that angle 4 is in the lower right-hand corner. Then I would pick down here angle 8. And then if I were to look, if I were to look at angle 7, which angle would be in the same corner as angle 7? And that would be angle 3 right there. They're both in the lower left-hand corner. And then what is the only angle that's left right there? That would be what? Our angle 6 right there. And that would match with, whoops. That would match with our angle 2 up there. Those are all of the corresponding angles. Now, to think about those guys, let's trace out a couple of these. So notice we have angle 4 corresponding to angle 8. Remember, they have both the same green arrows there. And if I look at that, what letter does it look like those two make? I could also look at maybe angle 1 with angle 5, and what letter does that make? And if you look at that closely, those make F. They are in the same corner right there, those two letters of the F. So hopefully that can help you remember. So I'm going to pause here and jump down and summarize what we have. Things that can help you remember what we talked about. The 3 of the main ones that we talked about were the Z, the C, and the F angles. And so if we have a Z, those would be the angles that would be considered alternate interior. And remember that that Z can go forward or backward. But those are the alternate interior. If we have the C angles, Those angles would be the angles that look kind of like that. And again, if we draw our lines there, those are the two angles that are C's. Those are what we call the consecutive interior angles. We can also draw our C backwards. Those are the consecutive interior angles. And then the last one that we had was the F. And the F was this one. And if I draw my lines with my transversal, I have these two angles in the corners of my F. Those are the corresponding angles. And remember, those are any angles that are in the same corner. And when you trace those, you make that F. So hopefully that's something that can help remind you. If you would like, you can jump into the practice problems. So for now, I'm going to pause this guy, and you guys try the practice problems, and I can catch up with you later and see if there's any help you need.